If you're working as a health, fitness, or a wellness professional and you come across clients that are dealing with fatty liver issues, this can be a significant problem, and when you can help that client improve that situation, it can be a really big deal. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand what seems to be the most common causes creating this trouble and steps you can help these clients take to turn the situation around. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving you medical advice, but I came across some information that I want to share that might help you with your clients that are showing some steps that people are taking that really seem to be creating some big improvement for this stuff. So when we're looking at fatty liver issues, we want to understand that a lot of times that there seems to be a lot of correlations with inflammation type issues, and you see these fatty liver problems, and then it can kind of lead to that NASH situation where there's more inflammation and then eventually cirrhosis, and then all of a sudden the client's on a donor list trying to hope they get a new liver. So that's not a list that your client wants to be on. So it's really important for the client to understand what's likely creating this problem. They're not going to be able to take a pill to fix it. They're going to have to remove some of the things that are creating the trouble in the first place. And when we look at this, it really seems to be like this storage problem. That's really what this fatty liver seems to be. And what happens is when we eat carbohydrates or glucose or even fructose or starch or sugar, when we're eating those things, the body can either use that glucose for fuel immediately, or it can store it in the form of glycogen. And it stores it in like our muscles and tissues and in the liver. The problem is this glycogen storage, it's not real big. It's not a whole lot of space to store this glycogen in. So as soon as that storage is full, the body's like, well, what else am I going to do? All those storage units are used. Where am I going to put the rest of this glucose that keeps coming in? Well, I'm going to convert it to fat so that it can be stored. And as it's storing all of this fat, it can end up in our fat cells, and then our pants expand and the client's got to buy bigger pants. Or it can also end up stored here in the liver like we're seeing with this fatty liver issue. So this can be a really big part of the problem. And this happens a lot, especially if a client is leaning a little bit more on that insulin resistance side, where the cells are just not listening to that insulin as much. And maybe the client's eating carbohydrates all day long and it's boosting that insulin high. And with the insulin yelling at the cells all day long, eventually the cell's like, hey, I'm not going to listen to that anymore. And then the cells become less receptive to that insulin and we become insulin resistant. So that can raise a lot of that inflammation, but can also raise a lot of that glucose in the system that is not being processed correctly. And the body has no choice but to convert it for fat, where it can be stored and end up in places like this. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I'm a fan of moderation. I'm a fan of a person enjoying themselves some, as long as they can get away with it. But sometimes with a client, we need to be able to explain to them in a way that they can understand that, look, it's okay to do some of this sweet stuff when you can get away with it. But when this is going on, you're not getting away with it anymore. This is a problem, and it's a significant problem. And if the problem is coming from all these sugars and starches and even fructose and all this stuff that people consume all day long every day, and if that's the problem that's creating it, how are you going to create any type of improvement if you don't stop what's creating the problem in the first place? So what can be really important is people are drinking like sodas and fruit juice. You know, you don't want your client to be like, hey, can you hold my 32-ounce fountain drink while I look on my phone to figure out why I got fatty liver disease? Well, that's why you got it. So these liquid sugars are like sugar, but much worse because they go right in really fast. There's nothing to slow down how fast that sugar hits the system. So if a client's drinking soda and fruit juice, you got to say, look, just put that in the trash and see what it looks like. If it looks okay there, then leave it in the trash. You really don't need it. If you're having cravings, then we need to take steps to correct the underlying cause of those cravings. But this is not something that an adult needs to consume. So we need to help clients understand that if you don't want to be on the donor list, it's not where the cool kids hang out, then we have to get rid of these things that are creating the problem in the first place. The next step that we want to take with clients is we want to help them get rid of vegetable oils. If they're cooking with vegetable oils and eating all these foods that contain all of these synthetic man-made vegetable oils, then that's a big problem. I'm going to put a link to a paper below that these folks kind of felt like this was the cause of this. Like it was all this. That's all they cared about, was these vegetable oils that were so inflammatory and in such a state that is not fit for human consumption, that they felt like that's what was creating all this inflammation and excess fat storage of these particular toxic fats. So if a client's using these, we want to help them get it out of the house. You don't need it. It's not healthy like they were telling us 50 years ago. So we should see clients cooking with things like butter and coconut oil and bacon grease and animal lard, all these saturated fats that can withstand those heats properly and get rid of these vegetable oils that they're using. There really isn't a place in nature where you're going to find 20 times the omega-6 that anything else is going to have in it. So we want to get rid of these oils with our clients and help them understand that there are alternatives, and they may have been scared away from butter or some of these alternatives before, but the science has shown now that these are much healthier. This is a much better option to use these saturated fats instead of these vegetable oils that are all synthetic and made by some guy named Hank. The next step we want to take is we want to help clients manage any insulin resistance issues, because this is really common now, and if somebody's insulin resistant, then they don't have to eat a whole lot of carbohydrates to create a whole lot of inflammation and a whole lot of trouble. So we want to help people reduce their sugars and starches and cut it back a little bit. A lot of people don't know how to do that, and we have to help clients, look, you can eat this real food here instead of what you were eating in this package here that's pretty much all just processed carbohydrates or starch or sugars. But as long as a client is leaning insulin resistant and they're consuming carbohydrates that are really keeping that blood sugar in the system a long time, then it's going to cause the body to want to convert that sugar into fat to store. So I'm going to put a link in the description below for this study where they used this Spanish Mediterranean ketogenic diet is what they called it. And they found that the results when it came to fatty liver were unbelievable. Like a lot of the people in the study saw major improvement, and everybody saw at least some improvement. And with the Spanish Mediterranean ketogenic diet, the person is really reducing carbs in a significant way. They're almost removing them completely so that they can get into this state of ketosis, and some people believe that that can have benefits too. But the main thing is that I don't believe that you need to do a ketogenic diet to fix fatty liver disease. It's just a really easy way to bring that insulin down significantly. And we don't want to have all of our clients say, oh, well, you need to do a Spanish ketogenic Mediterranean diet, because a lot of clients are not going to qualify to do a ketogenic diet correctly. They may be having digestive troubles that restrict their ability to process fats correctly, and then we're going to tell them to just eat all fats. That's not going to work very well. So we'll put a link in the description below for our video on which clients should not use a ketogenic diet, so you can understand the problems that it can create and maybe either help those clients use a different diet that can be beneficial, or help them improve those malfunctions or imbalances so that they qualify to use a ketogenic diet successfully and they can do something like that. What we like to see people do is to use some carb cycling. So maybe we help clients reduce their carbs for part of the day or part of the week. What can be a really easy step to do is to have a client reduce their carbohydrates for breakfast and dinner, and if they really need some carbohydrates, which a lot of clients do, not everybody does, but a lot of people do, if they need some carbohydrates, have them put it just in lunch. So what happens is when your clients are sleeping, that allows insulin to come down very low because they're not consuming any food. So that's when we can allow those cells to become more receptive to insulin again, when the insulin is very low. So if we're not having any food while we sleep, then when we wake up in the morning, we can extend that window by not consuming any carbohydrates with breakfast. And or if we skip the carbohydrates at dinner, then we're starting that window early, so it extends that window in the other direction. So this is a great and very simple step that you can take with clients that might not qualify to use a ketogenic diet, or maybe they just don't want to go that route, or maybe they're having other issues where they still really need some carbohydrates so that they can function as a human being. This is an easy way to allow insulin to come down for part of that day to really start improving the situation. And removing those carbs in those meals is also removing all of these things that would have needed to get stored in some way or converted to fat so that they can be stored. So this can be a significant step with your clients. Okay, this is going to be a big one. Alcohol. And you don't need to be your client's friend. You don't need them to like you. You need to help them improve their situation. That's why they're working with you, to get help to improve a situation. So a lot of them are not going to want to hear this about alcohol, but a lot of them are not going to improve this situation unless they understand this. With alcohol, not long ago, we would never even see a fatty liver issue unless a person was an alcoholic and drinking all of this alcohol that was creating these problems for the liver. It wasn't until pretty recently that people started having fatty liver disease that were not drinking alcohol. And when they were not alcoholics, and they're like, well, what do we call this? And I don't know, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I guess that's all they could come up with. But now we're understanding that we're seeing this now when people are not drinking alcohol. So if this was the only issue for a long time where we would see fatty liver, and you're dealing with fatty liver issues, do you really think that you should be drinking alcohol? That's how we need to explain this to the client. They need to understand that with the alcohol, not only are you looking at all the sugars that are coming in that alcohol in the form of alcohol and other carbohydrates that are in there, but we're also looking at those sugars in liquid form, meaning they're going to go in a lot faster and a lot harder and create a lot more trouble. But then we have all the toxic aspect of the alcohol going in as well that needs to be filtered out by this liver that's already not working very well. So you're going to give it more work to do when it's hardly functioning as it is now. So the best thing about the liver that clients need to understand is that it can really regenerate. It can turn some things around and get a whole lot better, but we need to give it a shot. We need to at least give it a chance. So if a person is dealing with fatty liver issues and they're drinking alcohol and they think that they're going to turn this situation around, well, explain to them, look, that's like you're dealing with a leaking dishwasher that's making water all over the floor, and you're going to clean that mess up with a garden hose. It's really not going to be that helpful. So if a client is dealing with this situation, they need to understand that it's just got to go. You just don't need it. You can still enjoy life. You can still have fun with your friends without alcohol. You just have to do the steps and understand, okay, I just got to do this or I'm not going to be able to turn this around. Because again, let them know we're a fan of moderation. We like people to enjoy themselves, but this is a wake-up call. This is saying you can't get away with it. So don't try to get away with things that your body isn't able to get away with. It's not going to let the client get to where they want to be. Okay, the next thing is to fix any cholestasis issues. And I'm going to put a link in the description below for some folks who feel like this is really the cause of this problem. And if you can just fix this cholestasis issue, then you can really turn it around. So to understand what's happening here, this gallbladder's job is to store this bile. And when the liver's functioning correctly, it makes this soapy substance called bile that it sends down here to store in the gallbladder. So then when we eat food and we acidify that food, once that acidic product leaves the stomach and goes down here into the duodenum, that triggers this gallbladder to squirt this alkaline bile down that helps us neutralize those acids. And the bile is also used to help us emulsify or break down our dietary fats. So that's very important. But what happens with a lot of people for a wide variety of reasons is this bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly, and it leads to this cholestasis that we're talking about. And it can lead to gallbladder sludge, and it can lead to gallstones, and it leads to somebody getting their gallbladder removed. So there's a lot of trouble that can come from that. But these people are feeling like this is such a big problem with the cholestasis, and that's why we're seeing so many correlations between these types of things, and I'll put links where correlations between gallstones and fatty liver. But they feel like this can be such a big problem because most people know that the liver filters toxins out of the body, but what a lot of people don't know is that the liver puts a lot of those toxins into that bile. So that when the bile goes through the intestinal tract, it's carrying those toxins with it, and the toxins can go out the back door when we poop like a champion. But if somebody's bile is not flowing correctly, then those toxins are not taken out. And those toxins are staying in there, and then the liver's got to filter them out all over again, and then the liver gets overwhelmed, and it can't do all of its jobs. And one of its jobs is very important, is to convert thyroid hormones. It converts those hormones to the active form of the thyroid hormone, and it can't do that if the liver can't do all of its jobs. It's too overwhelmed with all these other problems. So that's why we see a lot of correlations between these thyroid issues and fatty liver problems. So these folks are feeling like if we can get that bile thinned out so that it flows correctly, then the liver can do all of its jobs. It's not going to be overwhelmed. It's going to be able to perform better and not be as problematic in this area. So if a client's bile has become too thick and sticky to flow correctly, we really got to help them thin that out. And if you need to understand how to do that better, chapters 3 and 4 of my book, Health Pro Results, kind of walk you through helping clients figure out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and what steps you can help them take to correct that. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free, and that'll just kind of walk you through those steps. And if you're a consumer that just happened upon this video, I'll also put a link for my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, and that also shows you how to walk through those simple self-tests and understand the results of those tests. And that book is just more geared towards consumers, where the Health Pro Results book is really written for health professionals. But I'll put the links to both of those so you can get either one totally for free and kind of walk you through how to look at body chemistry so you can start helping your clients work with their body instead of against it. Now, some other big mistakes that people make when they're trying to improve this fatty liver issue is they'll go on a low-fat diet. You know, like, oh man, I got all this extra fat accumulated, so I'm not gonna eat any fat. I don't want to bring in more fat because it's already accumulated. So what the studies have shown is that this does nothing. It doesn't improve it in any way. And why would it if all of this fat is coming from glucose and carbohydrates and starches that are being converted to fat so that it gets stored? So reducing the fat in the diet doesn't really seem to do anything. Another big mistake is people like to do liver cleanses. Oh, my liver's not doing good, I'm going to cleanse it out. I'm going to buy all these liver cleansing products. But if the problem for this person is coming from vegetable oils or from consuming too many carbohydrates and starches, then what good is a liver cleanse really going to do? It's not going to stop the actual problem that's creating the issue in the first place. So that is not seeming to be a successful thing. Another issue is people do snacking, and they're snacking all day long, where they're keeping that insulin high all the time, keeping their blood sugar high all the time, becoming more and more insulin resistant so that their body can't process glucose correctly, and then more and more of that glucose is needing to be converted to the fat that ends up being stored in the liver. So we prefer to see people do their main meals 3 times a day and not snack all throughout the day like they told us to do a long time ago. I'll also put a link in the description below to a study that showed some significant improvement here from people using intermittent fasting, where they're skipping meals. Maybe they're not having breakfast, so that's even more time for insulin to come down. That's time that they're not consuming these kinds of things and creating even more trouble. So it appears that that has the ability to create a lot of benefit here. What you need to understand about intermittent fasting is even though they can create those benefits, for some people, when they're going too long without eating anything, well, then there's nothing getting acidified, and then that acidic stuff is not coming down here and triggering the gallbladder to release that bile. So one of the gallbladder's jobs is to concentrate that bile so that it makes it more effective. So if it's not being released, it's just staying in the gallbladder, and the gallbladder just continues to concentrate it until it concentrates it into sludge or stones, and we're creating that cholestasis issue that these folks kind of felt like, this is the big deal. It's the cholestasis that's creating all this fatty liver issue. So I feel that intermittent fasting can be beneficial for some people, but for some clients, without going food for that long, it can create stress hormones going too high. And stress hormones like estrogen also have the ability to thicken up that bile and create those cholestasis issues. So we'll put a link in the description below for our video on which clients should not use intermittent fasting, so you can help them figure out, is this right for you, or are there some steps maybe we need to create some improvements, and then you'll qualify to use this intermittent fasting and actually get the benefits from it. So the biggest takeaway to take from this is to understand that this is not always going to be the same for every client. You're going to have to use different steps for different clients depending on what's creating the issue for them. So maybe you need to look at their chemistry or their digestion, see what's going wrong, see which of these things they're implementing, and help them take the right steps that are going to create the improvements for them. Now, since that cholestasis can be such a big issue, if you want to learn how to help clients thin that bile out, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 5 steps to help clients improve bile flow. I can't wait to hear about your results.